matter because you guys are going to give all your time, attention, and energy to this first speaker. Everybody here today was here yesterday. Round of applause. You guys enjoy yourself. Willis Wee and the Tech and Asia guys did a terrific job. We saw guys from Singapore government, some terrific Singaporean entrepreneurs, and then those 8 startups culminating in Vibe's, the remote control virtual vibrator. How awesome was that? Very awesome. I'm still completely just excited and happy about ending the day on that note. It was just incredible. So we have an equally, if not better, more gooder day today. We have an awesome way to kick off the day today, featuring my favorite website. I spend more time on this website than I probably even do on Facebook or Twitter or even any other site. I am an admitted LinkedIn whore. I love the site. It has given me so much value in so many ways. Hiring teams in India and Australia, connecting business deals, getting funding, and it's just, for me, the most powerful resource that I have anywhere in the real world or virtual world. And Willis is going to be interviewing the head of Asia Pacific in Japan, probably the most interesting and sort of most potential market for LinkedIn. So please help me in giving a warm welcome. Put your hands together for Willis Wee and Arvind Rajan from LinkedIn.
Sorry.
Thank you. Great, thank you. Real coffee? Real coffee. Let me take a step first. That's damn good coffee. Come here often. Good morning. Good morning. How are you? Good. How are you? I'm good. You look very, very busy just now. You know, one of the challenges of working for a company based in California is that the busy part of my day is 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. when they're still awake, still working. So things are kind of hopefully they get a little slower in about an hour or so before that. Right. So how long have you been in Singapore?
So I moved here in July of last year.
About 7 or 8 months. And your family is here?
Yeah, we all moved out. It was their first time living outside the United States. But as you know, Singapore makes it really easy. So they're selling.
Okay. So for LinkedIn Singapore, what is your role?
Oh, so I run Asia Pacific for LinkedIn. So we have teams now in India, Australia, of course here in Singapore, and also in Japan. So I run the region. I'm responsible for driving revenue across the APAC and also driving members growth. Oh, sorry, am I faking that? Is that any better?
I think it's much better.
Okay, we'll go with that.
Okay, so you run LinkedIn Singapore.
That's right. Well, I run LinkedIn APAC, and then
LinkedIn APAC,
and Singapore is part of that.
Okay, so LinkedIn APAC consists of India, Japan, Singapore, Australia.
And yes, well, that's where we have people. Now, of course, we have members in every country in Asia. So we have members, we have close to 2 million members in China, we have members in really every country. And over the last 4 months or so, we've added many more Asian languages. So in Q4, we added Japanese, Korean, Bahasa Malay, Bahasa Indonesia. So we're really seeing growth throughout the region.
How big is the team in Singapore?
Well, if you'd asked me this 4 weeks ago, I would have said 6 people. But as of next week, we'll have about 20. Probably 30 by the end of February.
Wow.
So it's growing. You know, it's taken a while to build a team. You know, one of the things Willis you'd asked me about is what makes running LinkedIn Singapore like a startup. And I say the biggest thing that makes it the same is that the biggest priority I have is building the right team. And so we end up hiring really slowly to make sure that we're bringing in the right talent that has not only the right intellectual horsepower, the right experience, but also the right amount of passion. And you can't ignore passion as in terms of looking for the right people to hire.
Right. So we had a couple of coffee chats prior to this, right? the reasons that you actually come to Singapore is because you have the chance to recreate something. And it's not sort of like recreate, like establish something new, right? Like a LinkedIn office in Asia. So how has that experience been so far? Because you're an entrepreneur at heart, right?
You know, as we discussed, I've spent most of my life working for companies of under 100 people. And I've always enjoyed building companies from scratch. And so LinkedIn in Asia was an opportunity to do the same thing. When I joined LinkedIn, we had only about 200 people. So we're actually a pretty small company. And today we have over 2,000 people. So we've grown so big. But I think one of the things I've loved about LinkedIn is we tend to be very entrepreneurial in how we approach things. But still, for me, Asia was an opportunity to really build something from ground zero. I hired our first person in Asia in about 2 years ago now. And, we built a team in Australia, built a team in India, and it's just been really exciting. And we just had we had a meeting of all our entire APAC team last week, and it was amazing seeing over 100 people in the room. And, we're just sort of getting started in our journey.
Let me ask you a question. Do you like Singapore?
I love Singapore. I think the biggest adjustment for us is we moved from the San Francisco area, which is sort of this climate-controlled environment. Never gets above 25, or rarely does. It never gets below like 15 to 18. And I love that kind of weather, so it's, had a chance to get adjusted here. But, it's my family's from India. I think hot weather's in my genes. So, I got adjusted. I was in the U.S. last week, and I was pretty much cold all the time. I guess it's a sign of the weather. But other than that, it's been really great. The schools are great. It's so easy to get to all the markets that I care about. And Singapore has the best airport in the world. And getting in and out, it's just so convenient. Every time I go back to the U.S., it feels like, I'm moving backward in time, dealing with the long lines everywhere. At the airport, I sit in line for like 30 minutes trying to clear customs. Singapore is about 30 seconds.
Right, we do have one of the best airports.
And great food. I love the food.
So you mentioned about, you run LinkedIn like a startup.
Right.
So, do you have any examples? How do you run them like a startup?
Well, I guess I'd say a couple of things. First is, the biggest single thing I think about every day is finding the right talent. When you're running a small company, you're often pressured to hire people. You've got all this, you've got so many things to do, you don't have people to do it, and it's easy and tempting to hire the first warm body you see. And I think it's always a mistake. In my entire life, every time I've felt that I've been such pressure to hire that I just took a compromise on someone, I've always regretted it. And it's always turned out to be better for me to wait to get the right person. And so I think that's one of the big things. Every single person has the ability at this stage at a startup, but at this stage in Asia, to have an enormous impact on the organization. And we have to make sure we're bringing in the right people, because if you bring the wrong person, it sort of affects everyone around them. So things I look for are, again, I mentioned this earlier, but I look for passion, people who are excited about what we're doing, and be evangelists for what we're about. I look for people who have incredible integrity, because you're counting on them to represent you, and you don't have time to oversee everything you do. And then the other big thing I'm looking for are people who can scale, because whatever job I hire them for today, they're going to be doing something 5 times as large a year from now. And unless I believe they've got the capacity not to do the job that we're hiring them for, but the job a year or two down the line, they're not going to be successful. And I'd say the last thing, really, is I don't want to hire assholes. I think in a startup, you're going to be spending your lives together in the same room over and over again, late nights, early mornings. And unless you really like the people you work with, life's too short,
Have you had any assholes so far?
I hope we haven't. I don't think we have.
So, what are the few challenges that you face in Singapore as a foreigner?
I'm not really sure I've faced any challenges. I think one of the things that I knew about, but I probably underestimated, is the massive competition for talent in this country, especially in the digital space and in technology in general. There are, as you all know, Singapore's unemployment rate is practically near zero, and there's such a war for good talent here. So it's taken a little longer to build than I thought. But on the other hand, we have this really cool tool that I've heard about called LinkedIn that allows you to find talent. So we use our own product, and I think we've done pretty well. But it's probably done a little slower than I would have thought. On the plus side, though, I think, again, because such a large part of our revenue base comes from hiring solutions, that's really helped our business as well. So the sales team that we began hiring have done incredibly well in a very short period of time.
So you use LinkedIn for hiring?
We only use LinkedIn.
Only LinkedIn?
Yeah, so we don't, every single hire I've made in APAC has been done through LinkedIn.
How many users you guys have in Singapore?
We have, I don't know the exact number, I haven't checked in the last few weeks, but we have roughly half of the professional workforce in Singapore.
So you cover half of the professional workforce in
That's
Singapore?
right.
Right. So in terms of like businesses who use LinkedIn as a platform to look for talent,
Right.
how many of them?
Well, I think that I put them in sort of two rough categories. There are global companies that use us around the world. And so, for example, I think it's 75 of the Fortune 100 companies use LinkedIn, and their teams here in Singapore are using LinkedIn to look for talent across Asia Pacific. But then we also have many local companies as well, local companies in Singapore, not just looking to hire here, but looking to hire again across the region. So, it's been pretty good so far. And I'd say, by the way, it's across industries. So we see significant penetration in financial services, in high technology, but also other businesses as well. So, for example, Walmart. Walmart, the head of talent acquisition recently was talking about how he staffed the entire leadership team from one of his divisions just through LinkedIn.
Right. So LinkedIn's latest office is at Japan, right? That's the newest office that I think that also got.
Well, yeah, the latest one in Asia, that's right.
In Asia, right. Japan. So you run Japan, you basically manage the oversee the Japan office,
that's
the
right.
Indian office, the Australian office, and the Singapore office.
Right.
So how do you spend your time around the region?
So I'm on the road a lot. I'd say I'm on the road about 65, 75% of the time. And so I'm going into the regions, also looking at new markets that we might enter.
Which new market?
Well, we're thinking through all the markets in Asia, given the fact that we just launched in these new languages. All of those are opportunities for growth. So the way we think about our business is, we always begin with the members first. So as long as we're creating value for our members, well, then that creates opportunities over the long term to generate revenue. But in many markets in Asia, we're still at the first stage, getting membership growth to happen and to accelerate. So again, Korea, Malaysia, Indonesia, Japan are all markets where we are looking to spur that growth. Japan in particular is interesting. It's going to be the first market for LinkedIn in the world where we're doing localized development. Because we believe that for us to be truly successful in Japan, we have to really innovate locally and make sure we're building something that's truly going to resonate with Japanese professionals. But I think that'll be an approach that we end up taking from some other markets as well.
So besides Japan, which other markets are under your focus right now?
I think they're all of my focus.
All your focus. Yeah. I think you would expect this question. How about China?
China is one of those markets.
Really? So when can we expect LinkedIn China?
China is difficult. China is such a competitive market. It's so it's exciting because the scale, the scope. I just saw an article in The Economist like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago saying that, I remember reading about how the fact that China would be the world's largest economy by 2025, but then this Economist article was talking about the fact that it would be the world's largest economy by 2018. That's 6 years from now. So the scale and scope of growth is incredible. But it's also, I think, a market where a lot of Western internet companies have stumbled. It's a very competitive market with customers with high expectations, very sophisticated. So, we want to make sure that if we do enter the market, we do something that we think is likely to succeed. And that is not an easy thing. So at this point, we're simply just studying and thinking about it.
So what are you studying in China? The language?
Well, we're not available in Chinese yet. We're only available in English in China. Well, we're available right now in 16 languages, but our users in China are primarily using it in English.
In English. Yeah.
So, again, I think for us to be truly successful in the long term in China, we have to be available in Chinese. But again, we want to make sure that if we do try to enter the market, we do something we think will be successful, and that's taking a lot of time to think about. We don't know if that's going to be possible. But we want to investigate further.
So LinkedIn China, can I say that it's in the pipeline?
No, you can't say that. All I'm really saying is we're thinking about it, and I don't think we don't have a presence there yet, either in terms of language or in terms of personnel.
You have a couple of competitors in China.
That's right.
Right.
There are a handful of companies trying to do professional networking in China. And of course, there are massive, successful companies doing social networking in China. And I think on the social side, there's some incredible successes, from Tencent to Renren to, of course, Weibo, which is really in many ways becoming a social network. So that's been, there's a lot of successes there. On the professional side, I don't think anyone has really achieved any significant scale yet. From a few years ago, there were a couple companies like Kenji that have, that tried to do it, and they're still around. There are also some newer entries, some smaller companies that are all, still relatively small by Chinese standards, but they're trying it. And there are also, in addition to those companies, some companies creating mobile-centric professional networks. So there's a lot of activity right now that bears watching. But what I wouldn't say is that anyone has really cracked professional networking in China online.
So in other words, like you're not worried about competition in China?
Well, no, I wouldn't say that we're not worried. I think we're definitely looking at it closely, but I think it is fair to say that we haven't seen anyone break out yet in China. And where we believe someone has won the professional networking game in China.
I thought Tianjin has done pretty well.
Well, I think they've done okay.
I think we talked about that before. Right?
Yeah, they've got a few million members in China.
Yeah.
And they've been around now for, about 6 years, perhaps? Quite a while.
6 years.
Yeah.
And I think they are acquired by one of the French companies. Right?
They were acquired by a French company, and they tend to talk about a lot of successes in the market. I think from our perspective, they're interesting what they've done. I wouldn't say that they've received a lot of success. I don't think they've received a significant amount of engagement in the market, but maybe they will. I mean, we don't discount them in the market.
Right. I think they're gaining like 300,000 users a month.
Okay.
Yeah, that's quite good. So for LinkedIn China, you guys are having 1 million users, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, probably more than that now, yeah.
And one of the biggest advantages for LinkedIn is that you guys are not blocked in China.
That's right.
You will block once.
Yes, that's true.
Right? It's just for like 1 week.
1 day.
1 day, yeah, right, 1 day. And I think it's a huge advantage over other social networks like Twitter and Facebook.
Well, I think the advantage we have, of course, is one of context, because the activity on LinkedIn is always professional. And most of our members, I don't know most, but a significant portion of our members also belong to social networks. They may belong to Facebook, they use Twitter, but the context in which they use them is very different. So, most people, even in the US, for example, who have political opinions, don't necessarily want to broadcast those to their professional colleagues. They like to keep, their professional and social life separate. And so the context of LinkedIn really is about business. And I think that is something that is true for our users in China. They're using it for business. We have now Chinese users connecting to other professionals all over the world and getting deals with them. One of my favorite stories, and it's a little dated now, but I read about this, I think it was last year or the year before, but we had a member of the Netherlands that went to LinkedIn and complained about their iPhone network. But was asking his network how he could improve the life of his battery. And a user in China communicated back to him and said, well, I've got this new battery technology, would you like to try it out? So he sent the guy a battery, the guy tried it out, and the two of them now created a business selling iPhone batteries. They found each other because of LinkedIn. I think this guy was running a very small business in the middle of nowhere in China, found this member in the Netherlands because of LinkedIn, and they've now created a new business opportunity. And there are examples of those kinds of things happening all the time. And as China is becoming such an important global force, we see not only users in China looking to find and build relationships with users and customers all over the world, but the opposite. And when I travel around the world, meeting with many of our largest customers, the most frequent question I get is, or the thing I hear from our clients is, we are looking to hire more in China, how can we help? And it just speaks to the fact that there is so much going on in China, and it's becoming so interconnected with the rest of the rest of the world.
Right. So you're sort of like stuck in Singapore because you moved your entire family here.
I wouldn't say I'm stuck in Singapore. I have the privilege of being here in Singapore.
Okay, you are here, so I would expect that you are here for long, right?
Yeah, I think like a lot of people who come here as expats in Singapore, I'm technically here for 2 or 3 years. But, a lot of people, I've met people who came for 2 or 3 years and have been here for 20. So, I don't know, we're not thinking that far ahead. I think for now, I think I've got the most exciting job I could have in the world. There's so many interesting, creative things to be done. The brand is doing so well. Our teams are growing, and every day has new sort of intellectual challenges. And that's what I love.
Can you tell me, like, what are the 3 things that really excite you about building LinkedIn?
Well, so well, let me speak about building LinkedIn APAC first, and then
Okay.
we'll talk about Singapore. I think the things that excite me is that, again, as I talked about, in markets like Japan, we think that we'll have to do some things that are innovative that we're not done anywhere else in the world, in terms of developing new products, new ways of marketing and engaging our users. And that's really exciting. You get to work with really interesting challenges with smart people who work for us in that market. I think India is another exciting market. In India, when I hired the first person on our India team at the end of 2009, I think we had about 3 million members. And now we have over 12 million. And so the growth rate has really been stupendous. And for us, the challenge in India is, how do we continue to grow aggressively and also build a revenue base there? And it's really fun. I get to go back to India. My family's from India, but I wasn't born there. I never spent a lot of time there until the last couple of years, and I go back there all the time. That's really exciting. And then Australia is just moving along, taking off like a rocket. And on every measure, Australia is one of the most exciting countries for LinkedIn around the world. So there's a lot going on here, and it kind of, you take a step back. Our focus as a company is on the 640 million professionals around the world. And over 40% of those professionals, are here in Asia Pacific. Right. So as we think about the medium to long term, an increasing focus of our business globally will be here in Asia. And so while, we've been around now, and for a few months here in Singapore and in Asia for a couple of years, we're still at the very start of our journey in Asia. And so that's just an exciting thing to be part of.
So in other words, like, just to summarize everything, you like to see things grow, right?
Yeah.
So you like to see in different offices across APAC, see them grow.
Yeah. No, that's right. And I think it's also exciting working with people across so many different cultures. Often when I speak to my colleagues back at our headquarters, they talk about Asia Pacific as a market. And I always tell them, Asia Pacific is not a market. I mean, you've got such distinct countries with different languages, different cultures. It really is a region with very different, distinct audiences. And that's what makes my job so exciting. I get to go to all these places, learn about the culture, learn about how to tweak what we do, tweak our global playbook to be locally relevant. And that's pretty exciting.
That was supposed to be my main question. So, because can you speak, besides English, what other languages can you speak?
I speak Tamil like a 3-year-old.
Okay.
So I speak French like a 10-year-old.
Okay.
And I speak Spanish like a 5-year-old.
Chinese?
Not Chinese, unfortunately. My kids are learning Chinese.
Serious?
And I'd love to learn Chinese.
How about Japanese?
No, unfortunately not. I've got business cards in Japanese.
So, like, my question is, as a APAC managing director, how do you expand, how do you manage the office if you don't understand the language?
Yeah, well, it comes down to hiring the right people. So what we look for when we build teams in all these countries is, we look for really entrepreneurs to run our offices. And, like if I look at, for example, both India and Australia, Hari Krishnan, who runs our India operation, used to run MySpace in India, but before that was an entrepreneur with a startup. Cliff Rosenberg, who runs Australia, used to run Yahoo in Australia, but before that was an entrepreneur as well. So I look for people who think about running businesses like startups. And, I think, and the same thing is true for Japan. I mean, we're looking for people with entrepreneurial DNA. So, I hire the right people, and then I trust those people to make the decisions. But one of the things that was important to us is we want to make sure that wherever you walk into a LinkedIn office around the world, and we now have offices now, I think, in 14 countries. I think, yeah, that's about right. No matter where you walk into a LinkedIn office, while people may be speaking a different language, they may be doing things that are, maybe a bit more localized, it feels like the same culture. Right. And we spend an awful lot of time talking about culture at LinkedIn and values. We recently, last week, had our global sales conference. We had over 1,000 people from around the world there at this conference in the US. And most people who went to that meeting were sort of surprised because normally we go to a sales conference, lots of people getting on stage talking about the numbers and delivering these rah-rah speeches about financial performance. And we course, did very well financially, but people were quite pleasantly surprised that most of the time we spent on stage was talking about values and culture, and how important that was to our company, and what we demanded of not only of every individual joining LinkedIn, but what we demanded of ourselves as a company.
Well, I think that's one of the problems that startups face in Southeast Asia. I say, for example, in Singapore, our market is so small,
right?
And we are sort of like forced to get out of the country. But the difference between startups and LinkedIn is because LinkedIn has so much resources, right? You guys can hide the best. But for startups, we can't. I mean, it is a right formula to find someone that is entrepreneurial and they understand the culture, right? You get them to build a company, at their own native country. Right? But the thing is that for startups, we can't have that kind of like luxury of resources, right? To hire the top minds, to do the stuff for us.
Well, I think you're right. We do have the privilege at LinkedIn to have a brand that people have heard of and have the ability to attract really strong talent. But what I would say is that people, you're trying to attract a startup, are often attracted by different things. I've been in that position most of my life. Hopefully you can find people in that startup that are willing to sacrifice a large part of their life, and maybe sacrificing not getting good enough pay, for the chance to build something, right? Build something from scratch and be part of something incredible. But something you and I have talked about over coffee before is that the day-to-day of running a startup is awfully hard.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really tough, and often it's only fun when you look retrospectively, because you get to accomplish things that you never do in a bigger organization. And that's why people like myself, most of my life has been in these startups. Every now and then I've worked for a bigger company, but I've always ended back at a startup again because I used to miss that kind of energy you get from all things being accomplished. One of the things that I've loved about LinkedIn so far is I get to do all those same things, although I'm part of a bigger company.
Right. So let's talk more about your experience in Singapore so far.
Sure.
So have you mingled around with entrepreneurs in Singapore?
I really haven't. It's one of those things that I'd love to do more of. This event is a great one to do that. But
you can start from today.
There you go. I think one of the challenges I've had is that I'm often just not here very much.
Right.
While I mentioned that I've been on the road sort of 65% of the time, the first few months here, I've just had my head down looking to hire talent. To be honest, since October, I've been on the road more like 80% of the time. So I'm just not here in Singapore that often, so it makes it hard to really develop deeper roots. But as I build the team out, and we have other people that are operating for us across the region, I think I'm looking forward to doing more of that.
So, is there any chance that you would one day quit LinkedIn and build your own startup in Singapore?
It's a good question. You've asked me that one before,
yeah.
and the answer is I haven't worked out that far yet. I think for me, it's there's so much to get done over the next couple of years. I'm going to have my head down pretty much building LinkedIn across this region. But I'd never say no to the idea that someday I'd be doing a startup again. But I think there'll have to be a little bit of a gap. It's before if I were to leave LinkedIn at some point, just take like 6 months to decompress before I dive back in again.
Right. So last question for you. So you mentioned that you have experience, expanding to different offices in the APAC region. So one of the biggest problems for Southeast Asian startups is that we do not know how to expand, right? So you know how is it like to run a startup. Right. You know that we are all tied down to we don't have a lot of budget to play with. So in your own opinion, right, because you have expanded to several of the countries in APAC, right, what are the few tips that you would give, for a startup that don't really have that doesn't really have much resources, right, to expand across APAC?
Well, I'd say one of the big things not to do is try to expand too quickly. I mean, if you've got an idea or a business model, first figure out, test it as much as possible. I mean, make sure you've got the model right. I've seen so many companies that say, we just want to expand around the world. And they open up offices all over the place without really figuring out whether they're going to be successful anywhere. At LinkedIn, for example, it took LinkedIn 4 years, actually 5 years before we opened up our first office outside the US. Because we wanted to make sure we had kind of figured out the crux of the business, figured out what was going to really drive value before we began trying to expand globally in terms of physical presence. And then I think once we figured that out, we began expanding more aggressively, and it's really been the last 2 years that that's happened. You know, I think in any startup, what you're always doing is juggling tons of balls, right? I mean, and the hardest thing you have to do at a startup is prioritize. And I think what I really recommend that people do, you know, try to do this on a pretty regular basis, is think about like a 2x2 matrix. Think about sort of on one axis, it's sort of likelihood of success. On the other axis, size of opportunity. And all the things that you're working on, make sure you plot them out. And anything that's, you know, low likelihood of success, small opportunity, you shouldn't be doing. And you should have a lot of stuff in the top right corner, maybe a couple of the other places. But you should plot everything out and then actually think about what you're doing every day and how much of your time are you spending on those high value opportunities. And often what you do every day, you do all these myriad things. And some of those things aren't actually moving the needle. They're not actually the big things that you need to accomplish. You're spending time on a lot of administrative stuff. You'll be spending time, you know, split a million different ways. But the stuff that you really think is going to move the business forward, you're not spending enough time on. And I think if you actually, you know, and I do this myself occasionally, is about once every month, I actually look at my day over the last week and say, well, how much of my time did I actually spend working on the biggest problems that I thought were going to move the business forward? And often you realize, geez, that's only 10% of my day. And it's always a good point, time to reflect on that. And say, you know what? How am I going to move that to 30% of my time? And doing things like that are really important. In terms of expansion, though, I think that it's, you know, they're always bigger. It's always easy to look at opportunities in other countries and go, wow, that's what I should be doing next. Because the stuff I'm doing right now is too hard, or it's not really quite working. And I think it's easy to be lured in by the excitement about the markets. But until you've figured out whether you've got something that really works where you are, I think it's sometimes a mistake to try to go too big too quickly.
Cool.
That's a very long-winded answer, by the way. Sorry about that.
Oh, it's good. I like it. Round of applause. Arvind.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Terrific. Thanks for all the really interesting insights. That's great. So keeping on the theme of large and ever